Welcome to De-Stress Your Business, the podcast where we show you how to get incredible results in your business without constant stress. I'm Alexis Kingsbury, a serial entrepreneur and founder at AirManual, and I'm joined by my co-founder and co-host, Paddy Mann. Hi there, Paddy.
Good morning.
So in our last few episodes, we've been looking at employee onboarding. We've gone deep into the incredible stress that's caused by bad onboarding, and we've gone tactical on how to implement both company onboarding and also role onboarding to avoid this stress and unleash the potential of new joiners. One area we haven't touched on is what happens before day one. A common mistake is to kick off the process when the new joiner walks in the door for the first time. But at this point, we've already missed an opportunity. There are things that can happen before day one to make the whole process better. So today, we're going to dive into what you can do before day one, how to implement this, and the impact that this can have for both the new joiner and your team. So let's get started. Paddy, why should we start employee onboarding before day one? And as a result, what stress can we avoid?
Cool. So, of course, before a new joiner comes in, there needs to be some preparation work that happens in HR and for the manager and so on. But what we're really talking about here is the onboarding actually kicking off for the new joiner. And, well, why would you do that? Well, for some of the reasons that we talk about having, the goals of onboarding more generally. We want to take someone who's excited, but at the same time anxious about their new role. And as quickly as possible, we want to make them feel welcome and supported. And like the job that they're walking into is going to meet their hopes and desires of the new role. And the sooner we can begin that conversation, that engagement, the better. And that can absolutely start before day one. So if you take a good example, you can have someone who receives almost from the moment that they've received their job offer, they start getting information which lets them know what they can expect, and other stuff. We'll go into more detail about all the bits that we'll have there, but other kind of details which let them know what's going to happen, and it makes them feel welcome and supported. Then they're going to feel reassured, and they're going to feel like they know that the company will support them on day one because they're seeing evidence of it in advance, and they're going to feel welcome because you're showing evidence that you are taking the time out from your jobs to support them even though they haven't started. The flip is if you don't have that, you have this big hole, and it's this kind of uncomfortable silence where the whole recruitment journey, you've been more and more and more excited to the point where you've signed a contract and you're really committing the next part of your life. And then there could be this really awkward gap where it could be a few weeks or even months of radio silence, and you start to have doubts. And not only do you then, you've got these doubts, you've got this nervousness, and then you go into day one, and it also means that as you start, there's so much more that needs to be covered. It means that the rest of the process gets slower too. So you're just leaving the new joiner in the lurch. It's not good. There's an opportunity to make them feel amazing. And you're missing an opportunity to make the rest of the process go smoother and with more momentum, more joy.
Yeah, I think that's well put. And I think I've spoken to business owners over the last couple of weeks actually, in I'd say probably 3 or 4, where this is one of the challenges that they have is how do you make sure that you sort of transition from, in many cases, a great recruitment process. I think in probably 3 out of the 4 that I spoke to, they had great recruitment processes, and they felt like actually, if anything, the problem is this so good that what they then come into and how they start the onboarding journey was kind of not meeting up to that standard. And as a result, they had some examples where they'd have failed hires, people leaving within 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, or 7 months in one example. And it's funny, like I remember them saying, I'd actually prefer it to be 2 days or 2 weeks rather than 2 months or 7 months, because that they kind of felt like, well, at least I'm not pouring more investment of time and money into a person that then doesn't stay. But of course, the ideal is that you ease that transition, right? You support them in moving from being excited about starting to feeling confident that they've made the right decision. And I remember a particular hire that we made a few years ago, where she had gone through a recruitment process with us, was absolutely fantastic, but hadn't quite made it versus some of the other candidates that we had. We kept in contact, and I think it was maybe 6 months, 9 months later, we had another role open, and so we went back to her and said, would you be interested? And I remember that she was saying, oh, it's a bit awkward because this is my, based on the recruitment process, this is the dream job, and you've supported that through the ongoing conversations. But I have taken employment somewhere else, and I feel uncomfortable that I'm leaving after just 6 months. And of course, the impact on the CV and how that felt socially and so on. So she's kind of, oh. And so she thought about it and decided that no, for the good of her future career, she would come and join us, and that was the right decision. But then, of course, she had a final day at that company and felt really awkward, and people are saying goodbye and being really nice, and I think I've got a feeling that it was even a bit awkward because they were being super nice to her and making a bigger deal than even for someone else that had left who had been there longer. And so she felt like they really had appreciated her, and so she walked home and thinking, oh, am I making the right decision? And I think that's an important, regardless of what we did next, it's an important realization is that when you're making a hire and when you've, got someone to even agree their start date, agree that they're leaving somewhere and so on, the risk is that you think, oh, well, they're fully committed now, everything will be fine. And of course, the emotional stuff that's going on in the background, you can't really see or be prepared for. And so, we were fortunate, I suppose, that our onboarding process does start before day one. And as a result, when she got home, I think she received a gift of a awesome gin, because she's into gins, and also a welcome email with setting some expectation, all these sorts of things. And as a result, it kind of calmed and gave her that sense of, okay, no, I am making the right decision. This is a company that does value me, or also values me, and is going to provide that structure. And I think that's so important to think about the mindset and the emotional state of that new employee. Yes, sure, you've agreed a start date, but that there's a lot that can go on in between. So I've alluded to a couple of things there, but what can we share with the employee or ask them to do before day one? What's appropriate?
Well, yeah, that's that's a great example. In that one, you've got the both sharing information, which helped her feel calm about what was going to happen next, and a gift which really made her feel incredibly welcome to the new team, even though she hadn't formed part of it. And it's so easy to imagine a slightly different set of circumstances where those things don't happen, and over the weekend she spends that stressing and talking to family and friends and maybe even reverting her decision, and for all the effort that we've now put into this hire at this point, and we can say now after having had her part of the team for a few years, one of the an incredible hire, frankly. She was an absolute rock star. The impact if that had gone wrong, and it would have been so easy for it to go wrong, and the steps that we took just weren't difficult, they weren't time consuming, they weren't derailing us. So yeah, what can we share ahead of time? I think the most important is the communication. It's the continuing that conversation, so it never feels like they are no longer your concern. It should, from the moment that you've made that hire, you need to basically say they are a member of the team. They're not just on holiday, because they are basically, they're in their own mini project of getting ready for the new role. And that may be that they are just trying to get into the right mental space while they're finishing off another role. And it could come with all sorts of, politics and emotion and stress that you don't have any visibility of for good reasons. It could be that they're not working and they are super pumped and they are desperate to get going on something, and will lap up anything you can share their way. There's all sorts of situations, but there's basically someone getting ready to join it and trying to prepare themselves, and it may be that they've got time to do it, it may be they don't have much time, but they are still trying to get themselves into that mental state. And so we need to be continuing that conversation. And so like the absolute baseline is that you would be, of course, the contracts need to be signed. And then you can be sharing things like policies and other bits of information that they need to be aware of it. It's great that you're doing it ahead of day one, because it's just stuff that needs to be reviewed and it helps them to get a feel for things that are going to happen. Those aren't the fun ones, but at least something's happening. A much bigger and more valuable one is sending an email which shares how their first day will work. And in this, you can explain how they're going to be welcomed, who they will be talking to, the types of things that they will be learning. And what this does is just make them feel reassured that they're not going to be walking into a job where they get put on a desk and they have to wait a few days for the laptop, because that's an experience that quite a lot of people have had, or at least have heard from a friend. And that is the ultimate fear, is being hired by a great recruiter and then walking into a job where the team around you is not there, is not providing the support. Yeah. So at this point, we're talking super lightweight. We're talking contract policies, how your first day will work, make a big impact. And if you've got a prolonged period, if we're talking a month or more between that recruitment and the hire date, then check-ins to keep that going, just to give them an update, remind them, we're still thinking of you. This hasn't changed. Have you got any questions? What we can do is we can get quite a lot better than that without a huge amount more effort. So the chances are, they've done a lot of research in the recruitment. They care about your company. You've hired them, and they've found out the information they can through talking to you and the public site, your public website. But they haven't necessarily got the depth of knowledge which you're going to give to them on their first day as a new joiner. It wouldn't have made sense for them to go that deep, and they wouldn't have access to the kind of documents that you'll be sharing. And so you can start sharing that with them in advance. Things like your vision, your values, your team members. You can be sharing kind of profile shots and brief descriptions of the people they'll be interacting with. You can be describing how you work together, what tools you use, how you do your meetings. You can describe how you're going to support their growth and their personal development and career. And rather than just looking at the first day, you can be talking about how the first week or longer, you could be talking about the first months are going to work for that new joiner. And all of that information is ammunition to get them more excited and feel more and more supported, because they know that you've done the prep work. And all of these things you have to do anyway. So it's awesome for the new joiner because they have the opportunity to look at it. It's also awesome for you because it means you've definitely done it ahead of day one, but you've almost optimized the process in doing so. So yeah, I get all that information, and communication is great. And then, as you shared earlier, any little extras and little niceties, like just little emails, notes from the team, a little gift, they are what we call the sprinkling on the wow factor. And while not absolutely necessary, it's those moments which really put smiles on faces and lead to those new team members talking to everyone they can down the pub about the amazing experience they've had today, when that bottle of gin arrived at just the right moment to perk them up and get them excited again.
Yeah, agreed. And I think any ways that feel appropriate and in line with your business, with your brand and so on, that you can do to make them feel welcome, supported, valued, and like they've made the right decision are really powerful. I think, whether it's a gift, or if you're a business where perhaps you have either a uniform or some swag, sort of shirts, caps, whatever, that can be an appropriate thing to send as well. I think other things that are quite nice is collecting some of the information that you'd require of a team member to perhaps put on their badge. So if they're going to have some badge with a photo, or maybe they're going to have a business card, or maybe it's featuring on the website, like collecting that information in advance so that they can have that from day one, so that they feel they're part of the team, rather than it being like, 6 weeks later they finally get their business cards or whatever, can make a big difference as well. So I think also I'll pick up on, you mentioned there sort of early on, you kind of went quite past like the contract side and said, there's a contract that needs to be in place. But I want to kind of underline that, because if if as a business that you don't put those in place early, then that can cause the employee to feel like am am I definitely starting? I've not an employee contract yet, and I feel uncomfortable sharing some of the information that I'm being asked to share because I don't think we've signed an NDA, and those sorts of things. That by getting those in early on, you could look at them as being very admin-y, but actually they can help. They create some of that commitment, and they allow you to share more than you might otherwise be able to do. And so I think the more that you can do that, and particularly if you frame it up as this is so that, rather than go, oh, I'm sorry, really sorry, this is boring, but here's a contract, teeing up the fact that we want to make sure that we're ready to go from day one and that everything's in place. As a result, here's how you can support that. Here's the contracts that you can fill in. Here's the policies that you can review and agree to so that you're up and running. And I think that's really powerful. Now, there's a risk with everything that we've kind of discussing, that there becomes quite a lot, and depending on the business and depending on what needs to be in place, there's a risk that of course some people will be excited and keen to do a lot in advance of joining, but others may be busy with their current jobs. It depends on how much of a notice period they had, and therefore the gap and so on, and how busy that is. And we've certainly employed people who are very busy in their current jobs, but maybe it's even one of the reasons that they want to move on is because they're not getting work-life balance and so on. So they may not appreciate being asked to do lots of tasks before day one. So how do we balance this?
Yeah, good question. And I think it's a point where a lot of business leaders will feel uncomfortable asking people to do anything, because of course there are new joiners who are, as you say, they're busy as anything trying to finish their current role. It's part of the reason that they're looking for a new role, and so there's the balance. The way we would approach this is we would look at, there are some things which they will need to do. So getting contracts and so on signed will just need to happen, and that we definitely follow through with, and we'll send reminders. There's then the kind of the basic communications of staying in touch and letting them know what's going to happen on their first day. Then we would expect that they, these are simple emails and they would read through them, but they wouldn't need to do, a huge amount of work. It might be a longer email, it might take 5 minutes to read, but it's not something which is going to derail them or ask for any kind of commitment. Whereas kind of reading through vision, values, team, how do we work together, how we support your growth and so on, that we would absolutely make optional. And so we provide the guidance and we say, look, if you're excited, you can go ahead and start reading through this because it is really valuable. We're going to be covering it as part of your onboarding, and it's going to give you a load of context, which is going to help you on day one. But we'll make it very clear on the email that we understand that you're going to be busy with the end of your other job potentially, or other situations in your life. There is no requirement to do that, and we will be covering the same material in the onboarding. We won't be repeating it if you've read it, but it will be. You will have the opportunity to pick it up when you join the company. So it's essentially you're working to both camps. You're working to the people that are way too busy and saying, look, it's there, but don't worry. We understand. We empathize with your situation. And we look forward to covering it with you when you start. And then you go to the ones who are super excited and are desperate for more information, and you give them the opportunity to go deep so they can go flying. A great example here is actually, even after we've shared all this information, we often get some new joiners saying, what else can I do? What else can I start reading? What would you recommend? And so one of the things that we try to do is also go, look, here are other areas where you could be researching. Here are books that you could be reading. We have recommendations in different departments of books which really help to give you some context throughout the way we work. And it's entirely optional. But if you've got someone who perhaps they've been on an extended break, they've got a month to go before their new job, and they just want to start growing expertise in that area. They don't mind that they're not being paid to do this personal development. They see the opportunity and they want to get going, then they can. So you're giving them that opportunity. And in doing so, not only are they kind of investing in their personal development and getting a head start, but they're also they're basically feeling like they're a member of the team sooner, and are therefore feeling happier and more content in their own, their own well-being as a result. So it's a huge win for everyone involved.
Yeah, I love that. And I was just thinking that same example, like where literally had emails from candidates, possibly even before we've shared, the kind of onboarding emails, where they say like, have you got some book recommendations? People are often willing to do a lot more than you might expect, because this is an exciting big leap for them. Whether they're leaving a job they dislike, or whether they see yours as a stepping stone, or whether they see it as the future of their career, they're making it as a positive improvement in their life. And so they're willing to invest in that. And so I think, supporting that in the ways that you've described, and balancing it in the way that you described, I really like. I think, making it clear that you don't have to, and making it clear that we will, if you haven't done these are things that we'll pick up on the first day, but this will make it, if you do get a chance, then great, and it'll make it smoother, and it'll mean we can move more quickly. If I think about, like, one of the things that we would share would be like our values and our journey and our vision. But in our onboarding checklist on day one, we'll check in on those. Like, have you had a chance to look through those? So if they say, oh, sorry, no, then that's fine, and we can go through it in detail, or at least it's providing the checklist so that they can go through it in detail as one of the next steps. Whereas if they have, we can ask some questions and explore their understanding to see if there's any gaps or questions. And I think having that balance is really, really powerful. So I really, really like that. So, how and when should we kind of deliver this? Like, we've talked about, perhaps they're sending the email. Like, exactly when should this land? Because I think for some people, earlier than day one, and when exactly should it land? And is it just an email? What would you say to that? What's the right approach?
Cool. So essentially, it's kind of more broadly, when do we need to start thinking about onboarding, and who are the people involved? Now, essentially, we see it as it kicks off almost after recruitment ends, because you don't want to completely leave a gap. There needs to be something, certainly getting contracts and so on should just happen as quickly as possible. And then, if there is a long gap, then sure, you're not going to be doing everything months and months ahead, but you'll be wanting to keep the communications going. Then, we've said that it's typically that around 2 weeks before that you really want to pick the heat up, and give a lot more guidance about what's coming for the new joiner. And the way that we would implement that is essentially checklists. So overall in the company, you've got a new joiner coming in, we'd have a checklist for the HR, which is getting prepared for a new joiner. And part of that will be taking steps that need to happen internally, such as liaising with the IT team and telling them to kick off their own checklist to get systems set up, to get them set up in payroll, make sure other systems are all set up and ready. But part of it is also doing that engagement and communication with the new joiner. And initially, we set it up so that the HR team would simply send some emails to the new joiner. And now we've set it up so actually they send a self-service checklist to the new joiner, which includes that guidance on these steps are optional. So the new joiner starts off and can go through a simple checklist, sign it off. We can see exactly what they've done or haven't done ahead. We make no judgment, because we actively encourage them not to do it if they are busy, but it makes it really easy to review and for them to use. And also, we then continue with it being a self-service checklist after they have joined. It's something we've talked more deeply in other episodes. We highly recommend self-service onboarding, using kind of checklists which take them through the different steps, because it does allow them to work at their own pace. It does allow them to have a lot of autonomy and to be proactive. And in the examples we've been sharing today, it means it's okay if one person has done some of these steps ahead of time and another person hasn't, because they're working separately, rather than going, okay, all new joiners, you all need to come to this lecture on our values, regardless of how much you've talked about it or reviewed it already. So using these checklists works really, really well. The other key person involved is going to be the line manager. So the HR team's going to kick it off overall with their checklist. They're going to be sharing some guidance directly with the new joiner. When we're talking about what the new joiner can expect, not just on their first day, but in their first weeks and months, then that has to come from the team, from the manager. So the team, the manager will have his own checklist to get prepared, his or her own checklist to get prepared for the new joiner. And that will include a step to send an email with guidance on what they can expect in the first weeks and months, and may often include some book recommendations and other bits. So that's essentially we've got a few checklists, and I want to actually pick this up on another episode, just how to break a complex process like onboarding down into simple checklists and what that looks like overall, because it's probably hard to kind of mentally work it through. But essentially, you just got a few checklists, like one for HR to kick it off and to start that engagement, one for the line manager to do it within the team, another one for the new joiner to be using. And in terms of when it starts, it's kind of as soon as recruitment stops, but then turning the heat up with about 2 weeks to go.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I think particularly it's not a bad thing for that to be the trigger, right? They accept the offer, you agree the start date, and then the rest of your onboarding kicks off, sorting out the contracts and doing all those things. And I think, as you say, like we used to do it as an email, but the more we realised that there was valuable stuff we could put in there, including vision, values, completing our, agreeing to our IT security policies, securing their laptop, going through security training, all these sorts of things, which in some cases the candidates were kind of crying out for, like, oh, feed me more. It kind of became this monster email. And so, as you say, by using self-service checklists, we're able to make that much less scary and get that balance right between those.
One of the things that you often see on LinkedIn is when you look at some of the venture-backed companies or the big enterprises that have had a lot of time and investment in this, then you see they will share a handbook, and it'll be beautifully laminated, polished, and a load of goodies, and that's awesome. But essentially, we're taking that middle ground. We're taking the the first stage is you've got nothing, and that's not good. You're leaving them in the lurch. Better than that is to have an email and some communication. Then better than that is actually to provide quite a lot of information, and a really lightweight and easy way to do that is the checklist that we've been describing, because that's something you can set up in a few hours. And then at some point in future, when you've got a lot of time and money and a big team to chuck behind this, then absolutely brand it up, turn it into laminated content, stick it in the post, and it'll be a great experience beyond. But we can get a lot of that value with a lighter weight, quicker ways of doing it.
Yeah, although if I look at our own businesses, I'm not sure. If we said, oh, let's create a laminated set of this stuff, or let's create a glossy handbook, I'm not. I think I'd still want the checklist to sit on the top of that, because I'd want to make sure that the person's supported through it, because otherwise a big tome delivered through the mail could be a bit scary. But also I'd want to be confident that they've actually gone through it and used it and so on. Which, if they say, oh yeah, I've read it, and I'm kind of, they seem to be talking about our values as being something else that doesn't sound like our values. I'm not, I'm not sure that they have. It's like, so I think there'd be an addition rather than instead of. So although I agree that it's a nice step towards, and you don't even need to go that far, I'd say that you probably want to wrap it up like that, right, rather than have it instead. So yeah, no, but that's cool. Awesome. Well, unfortunately, we're coming up for time, so we'll close it there. But in summary, we've talked about how to make sure that new employees, when they're joining, that they have a great experience, and that you turn their anxiety into excitement, and that you make sure that you're going to have someone who actually turns up on day one and is excited to get started, and that you balance the requirements on their time effectively, so that those that are busy don't feel like you're asking too much, but those that are keen to get started and do more have got that available for them, and that you can do so, and you can start that process as soon as they have accepted your offer. So we'll also provide some link to the examples and templates that we've got for doing some of these things. But as regular listeners will know, we also run a weekly webinar on how to free up 15 hours per week and remove the constant stress of running a business without slowing down growth. That includes some guidance on how to make onboarding self-service and exactly what that looks like, sharing screen and everything. It's every Wednesday at 1 p.m. UK time. You can find out more and register at www.airmanual.co/webinar. And a final note for our podcast listeners, as a new podcast, we need your help. If you found the content today valuable, please just take 1 minute to leave an honest review, or if you're listening to this on social media, please do share it, repost it, like it. This will help the podcast to get more visibility and help more people. Otherwise, until next time, have fun.